And welcome back to another episode of the Ball Watchers podcast. I am your host, Evan Blust, alongside my co host, Joseph Muto. Joseph, how are you doing today?
I'm so good, man. The sun is shining. I get to talk football with my boy. I mean,
Yeah.
what more could a man ask for in
It really is
life?
the life, you know? Got some nice vitamin D today.
Yeah.
We've got lots of NFL stuff to talk about, which is good. We're we're still in the thick of the NFL offseason. I feel like we've got a long ways to go before it really dries out. And
Yeah.
this week we'll be talking about the combine. We've got a bit of NFL news to kick it off, but the combine, and I've been thinking, we kind of, I don't know if it was on the show, but I was kind of complaining about the combine last
Yes.
week where it's just like, what's the point? But I was thinking about it a bit, and it's like it is a place where you can kind of like fall in love with guys. You know what I mean? Like I feel like in the past, like Nicky Manwari last year, I got super hyped
Mhm.
on after the combine, and he was. It was great that he was drafted by Seattle. Very happy about that, and he was a key piece to that Super Bowl win. But I mean, just falling in love with those guys. DK Metcalf in the past as
Yeah.
well. Like you hear about a lot of players you may not have really known before. So I feel like it's good for that, if
Yeah.
nothing else.
It's a catch 22, honestly, because I remember Tristan Wirfs was absolutely crazy in the 2020 combine. He was absolutely electric, and then Anthony Richardson 3 years later, and
Yeah.
he's nowhere to be found. So it all depends, really.
You got to be careful. And I
Yeah.
think that I'll probably talk about this later, but I think quarterback is definitely the most deceptive position
Yes.
when it comes to the combine. And I think that that's something the offseason, I think the offseason narratives around quarterbacks are what really get people in the end, especially these GMs. Like you think back to Zach Wilson, where like he was not going to be the second overall pick coming off the season, coming off what really matters, which is the tape. Then you see this guy throw on air at his pro day, and all of a sudden he's the second overall pick. And I think that that's where it gets dangerous with quarterbacks at the
Yes.
combine. You know what I mean? It's like you watch them throw to random receivers, but no one's
Mhm.
covered. You're just throwing on air. It's like, how much information does that really give you? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Mhm.
an NFL quarterback, a first round quarterback, should be making all those throws for the most
Yes.
part. So
100%.
it's like I feel like, especially with quarterbacks, it's all about the tape. The other positions, I think the athleticism can really get you. Schemes are very different in the NFL compared to college for a lot of these guys, but quarterback, it's like just what do you put on tape for me? That's
Exactly.
kind of what I've realized this year. But let's get into it. We're starting off with some NFL news. We've got some. It was an interesting week. We've got a couple
Yeah.
trades here, but before we get into that, biggest story outside of that was Kirk Cousins. He's being cut by the Falcons. It's not a move that really saves the Falcons any money, but it was kind of predicted for a while and projected with the Falcons wanting Michael Penix to be the starter and Kirk Cousins not necessarily really flashing what he had done in Minnesota in the past. So the Falcons move on. And this is interesting just because that quarterback market is so thin, like we talked about. So a guy like Kirk Cousins could end up getting paid a lot of money and possibly starting next year.
Yeah, he's very sought after, in my opinion, especially with this class, like you said. But for the Falcons, I just think this is the right move. You cut your losses, and it didn't work out. And a lot of that time, Kirk Cousins was injured. But when he was on the field and he was giving you that product, it really didn't translate into what you wanted, which was a Super Bowl contending team when you signed him at the time. So this just allows Michael Penix to not have someone over his shoulder and he plays loose. And I think that's the number one reason why I like this for Atlanta. It's just if he's not the guy, there's no backup option. He's going to have a full season if he's healthy. And if he's not the guy, then you move on. But at least he has the opportunity to have no one behind him. If he has Kirk Cousins, you probably bench him week 8 if Michael Penix is playing bad. And then you still have question marks going into 2027. Is Michael Penix the starting quarterback? And to me, this is the year where the Atlanta Falcons can definitively answer that question without the Michael Penix not playing, barring any injury. So I love it from the Atlanta Falcons perspective, and I think it was the right move, and I'm really excited to see what Penix can do now.
Yeah, it's interesting for a couple reasons. I think it's somewhat surprising just because Kirk Cousins does have that history with Kevin Stefanski working together in Minnesota. But at the same time, like Cousins is not what he was in Minnesota. I think that Achilles tear really kind of slowed him down quite a bit, and he hasn't really got back to the heights that we really saw when he was a Viking. And then, yeah, from I don't know, it's Michael Penix is just such an injury prone quarterback, it feels like, where you're really getting rid of a guy who could be a solid backup. And it's not like it's saving you any money where you can go out and make your team better. So I get it from a sense too, where like I'm sure Kirk Cousins didn't want to just sit and be the backup, especially he can see and his agent can see what the quarterback market's shaping out right now. So it's probably a bit of a move like that too, where both teams were kind of like mutually agreed to part ways here. So I think Cousins will definitely find a home in the market. And for the Falcons, you do like it from the sense that now there is no question. It is Michael
Yes.
Penix. He's the guy, and you see what you can do there. And I really do believe in him. If he can stay healthy, I think he will really show what he put on film at Washington. Because, I mean, he was just an electric player in that last season. So I'm really hoping he can come back healthy and kind of do what he did in college.
Any predictions for Cousins? Early takes?
Oof. I don't know. The Jets I could see make a lot of sense just because, Cousins, I mean, Justin Fields
Mm-hmm.
is not making a huge amount of money. And if you just want a guy in there like a Kirk Cousins who, you're not going to win, but it's going to at least be like probably just below average quarterback play, which is much better than the Jets have gotten the last couple of years. I think it's like at least a stabilizing presence in that offense. So I could
That's
see him
great,
somewhere
dude.
like that.
I want to see a Vikings reunion, dude. I think this is
Mm.
perfect for Kirk Cousins to go back. I think Justin Jefferson wants him back, and I think there's an opportunity there where they have the whole roster there. Why not make it Kirk Cousins and make it a quarterback competition?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, the Vikings have shown that they're able to swallow their pride. I think a bit with this JJ McCarthy move. I mean, they fired the GM who drafted him. So, it's definitely a possibility. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the Vikings are one of those teams where if you get a guy like Cousins in there, they definitely could be a playoff contender again
For
too with
sure.
Kevin O'Connell at the helm. So, I think that makes a lot of sense
Mm-hmm.
actually. I like it. All right. Few trades here. We'll start with the Jets and the Titans. They go player for player here. The rare player for player trade. Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher, goes to Tennessee, and the Jets receive Tavondre Sweat in return.
Yeah, I thought the Jets fleeced this trade. I'm not gonna lie. I think I don't know, like Evan said it, he's been saying it this entire offseason, like Tavondre Sweat's gonna have a huge year, and the fact that he easily replaces Quinnen Williams in this defense, I think Aaron Glenn is gonna be licking his chops. And on the other side of the football, like we don't really know who Jermaine Johnson is as a pass rusher, really. He's been underperforming as a first round pick. And I just don't really see the vision, especially when this guy's going to become a free agent next offseason. So you needed edge pressure, but I don't think it should have came at the cost of a Tavondre Sweat who was going to be a key piece in this Robert Saleh defense. Like a Jermaine Johnson is fetching you a fourth or fifth round pick. I think the Jets would have taken that very easily, secure that draft capital. But to give one of your best defensive players away in order to obtain an edge presence, but you're just, trading player for player, like it doesn't make sense. You're not improving your team. And I thought you could have brought in Jermaine Johnson and still had Trevondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons on that defensive line. So it really makes no sense for me if I'm the Tennessee Titans. And if you're the New York Jets, I mean, you traded away Quinnen Williams for a first round pick who was disgruntled, and all of a sudden you replace him and you still have that first round pick from Dallas. So I think the Jets, they really won this trade over. I think Tavondre Sweat is a rising defensive tackle in the NFL, and the fact that you gave away an underperforming Jermaine Johnson when you already have Will McDonald in house and will probably draft an edge player with the second overall pick, I think the Jets definitely won this trade, in a trade that I'm really questioning the Titans on why they made this move.
I actually really like this trade for both teams. I think that from the Titans' perspective, why it makes sense to me is just like you already have Jeffrey Simmons as that presence in the middle. Like Tavondre Sweat, I definitely think he would have been good or great for the Titans next year. I mean, I said that I thought he could be like a high level player with Robert Saleh, kind of as the mastermind for that defense. But I just think that with Jeffrey Simmons there, he is a bit of a replaceable piece just because, like, you obviously do need two defensive tackles, but you have Jeffrey Simmons who will give you that high level of production. But on the edge, you really have nothing. They don't have any edge rushers. So I think that it was just a bit more of a position of need. And you can get a guy like Tavondre Sweat, maybe not someone who with that like size and athleticism, but a guy who can just eat those gaps and stuff in the middle of that defense in the like middle of the draft. So with Jeffrey Simmons being there, I think it made sense to flip him for an edge rusher. And you have seen Jermaine Johnson be a Pro Bowler in the past for the Jets. He's a guy who has shown he can get 10 sacks in a season. So I think that they're banking a bit on the potential. Obviously, Robert Saleh is a guy who's familiar with Jermaine Johnson as well from their time together on the Jets, but I also just love it for the Jets here. I mean, getting T'Vondre Sweat back, I'm super high on this guy. He's just so athletic for his size. I mean, he's like 360 pounds or something, and he can just move, and he's physical. He really just is always playing with a super high effort, and I think that you need those kind of guys on your defense. He really has that kind of attitude that I like, and I think that Aaron Glenn needs a bit of that on his defense. Is just those high motor guys because we've just seen so much dysfunction with this New York Jets team the last few years here, and especially last year. I mean, that defense was abysmal. 0 interceptions, just a terrible team overall, to be fair, but they need some of those just high motor guys, get the energy up. They're always playing as hard as they possibly can because I think that's what Aaron Glenn wants. And I mean, that's what Detroit had a lot of the time. And I think that that's the kind of culture that Glenn wants to create in New York. So you get a guy like that there, it makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. And the Texans, they've been busy today. I don't know, man. So I don't understand what the Houston's
Let's
doing,
get
man.
into
But
it, bro.
the first move they make is they trade Titus Howard to the Browns for a 5th-round pick, and he is extended 3 years, $63 million. And then they also trade for David Montgomery from the Lions. And in exchange for David Montgomery, the Texans send a 5th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and Juice Scruggs, who's an interior offensive lineman. And I think started for the Texans for a good chunk of last season. So the Texans trade away 2 more starting offensive linemen. Not that they were necessarily high-level starting offensive linemen, but still 2 more starting offensive linemen for the Texans out the door.
I don't get it, dude. I don't get it at all. I don't understand why the Texans keep trading away these tackles. And I thought Titus Howard had, a pretty good year, and he had an exceptionally well year compared to the rest of the offensive line for the Texans. And he was your cornerstone left tackle, who you finally replaced after you just traded Laramie Tunsil 2 off seasons ago. So I am like bamboozled as to why they're trading these guys and they're not extending them. I mean, who else are they really paying on this offense? Like CJ Stroud's still on his rookie contract. They haven't extended Will Anderson Jr. yet.
Literally just Nico Collins.
It's just Nico Collins. Like I genuinely don't get it. And instead, you bring in a running back, and I think David Montgomery is an incredible running back. But was this really a position of need? Like you don't know what you have with Joe Mixon. And I thought you hit pretty well with Woody Marks when Joe Mixon comes back. If he does return, that could be a 1-2 punch for you there. Instead, you give up more draft capital that you acquired from the Titus Howard trade and brought in David Montgomery. I think Montgomery's going to start, and I think he's going to have a really good year. But it's just history repeating itself over and over again with the Texans. They have no offensive line, so the running backs aren't going to look as good as they did with their previous teams. And you're going to ask CJ Stroud to drop back in the pocket, and he's going to be under wraps, make mistakes, throw the interception, and it's going to be up to the defense yet again. So I am genuinely so confused on the Texans. They're not drafting offensive linemen well, and they're giving up their picks in that they could draft offensive linemen and just picking up another running back. It doesn't make sense. They've gone through Mixon, Chubb, and Montgomery in like a year, and nothing's worked. So I'm bamboozled by the Texans. The fact that they got rid of their best offensive lineman for pennies to me is just an atrocity.
Yeah, I like David Montgomery as well. I think he's a great running back. And on paper, it's like trade for David Montgomery. He's a guy who him and Woody Marks can really be a pretty solid tandem, in my opinion, in that backfield. And I think Montgomery's a guy over the last few seasons who's proved that he could be a starting running back, your number one option there. But it's like, yeah, what is in front of him? There's literally nothing in front of him, and I think that is the biggest issue here. Is you get rid of Laramie Tunsil. Titus Howard I think he was playing guard or right tackle for them, but he was still like a starting caliber player. Ariante Ursary was really the only guy you drafted as a replacement, and he was solid last year. Like they did fine there, but it's not even that they're not drafting well at offensive line. They're just not drafting offensive linemen. Like, who is replacing these guys? And like, I don't know why you don't want to pay Titus Howard. It just doesn't make sense. And it's not like Juice Scruggs was definitely like a replacement level player, but at least he had played in that system before. Now you have to bring in 2 or 3 new guys again this offseason, and most likely they're going to be as good, if not worse. And the risk of them being worse is way higher than a guy who you had in house. And it's not like this is a super deep draft or a super good draft overall. So it really just does not make any sense to me. I don't know why you do this. And like honestly, I think the Browns, this is such a good deal for the Browns. I mean, you give up a 5th-round pick for a guy like Titus Howard when their entire offensive line is hitting free agency this season, off season, and it doesn't seem like a lot of them are going to return. I think it was already announced Wyatt Teller is leaving Cleveland.
Yes.
So, like getting a guy, locking down one of those starting offensive lineman spots with a pretty solid offensive lineman, I think is a very smart move for them. For the Lions, I mean, Gibbs is the number one guy there. I think they can draft a backup for Montgomery, and they kind of, I think they did him well, maybe not trading him to the Texans. They did him a solid in the sense that he'll get more playing time. It's just that it's the Texans, and I mean, they're like, it's just who's in front of them. But yeah, this for the Texans, they're basically just going, how bad can we make our offense before it ruins the team? Because like the defense is so good that it does make up for a lot of those offensive shortcomings, and it feels like they're just like giving up on the offense. But it makes it so hard to evaluate CJ Stroud.
Exactly. Every team ahead of them in the draft needs an offensive. Well, every team in the NFL needs some sort of offensive line help, and you are making these division title games, and everyone ahead of you in the draft is drafting all these good offensive linemen, and there's going to be literally nothing for you, and that's why you drafted Ursery in the second round last year because there was literally no one left. So it's tough for them in that sense. The Browns, they fleeced. Like, to have 5 starters be free agents on that offensive line is so brutal. So this is a good start in the right direction, and I think Gibbs, they're going to hit the ground running with him. David Montgomery was a cap casualty, and when you have Jahmyr Gibbs, like, you don't need to pay a guy like Montgomery. And I know the 1-2 punch is so crucial for a lot of NFL offenses, and it was the best in the league, but at the same time, like, Gibbs has so much potential. He's going to get 30 touches a game now, and you can invest more into that offensive line and really get this offense to where it was 2 years ago. So I love it for the other teams. It's just the Texans, I'm really scratching my head, and I don't understand why they keep falling into this pattern.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see. I mean, maybe they do. They're ultra aggressive in free agency and make a lot of moves, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen because they haven't done it before. And I mean, all they do is just dump solid offensive linemen or just starting offensive linemen. Like you need those guys. That's one of the most important. Like as a group, it's in one of if not the most important position on the field. So I don't know. Good luck, CJ Stroud. Maybe it's all like a plot, you know? It's like we know CJ Stroud is good. We're gonna tank the offensive line so he looks terrible. You know, sign him to a really team friendly deal.
Good point.
And then just build up the offensive line after that. But that would be some insane like behind the scenes like management strategies.
You gotta pray he doesn't get injured before that happens, man.
Yeah,
Jeez,
exactly.
holy.
Hopefully CJ Stroud is like working on his explosiveness this offseason, getting really fast because he's going to be running for his life a lot this season. All right, let's get into the combine, Joseph. It's an interesting year. I feel like going into the combine, maybe I shouldn't admit this as someone who has a football podcast, but I feel like I didn't know a lot of the names. You know what I mean? Like I feel like thinking about the mock draft and stuff, I'm like, I don't know like the half the people who are going to be drafted in the first round. Where obviously there is some of that where as you get close to the draft, you get to know the names a little better. But like, I feel like part of it is just there's not a lot of big names this year, you know, and it's concerning in my opinion. I feel like it just hammers home the fact that this is going to be a bit of a dud of a draft.
100%. And you saw like a lot of NIL money go to defenses, and so before the combine, usually there's like explosive offenses and great quarterbacks who are going to throw the football and go crazy before the combine, and you get excited, you get hyped. In this combine, like as soon as the defensive players were done, I was like, okay, I'm going to turn off my TV because I don't really care about the offense at this point. There were a couple of great offensive names, but at the same time, like the defense is stealing the show. And I think that's why you don't know a lot of these players. And I'm in the same boat as you. I didn't know a lot going into the combine, and now I know a lot more of these players, and I'm falling in love more with these players. So this combine was actually one of my favorites that I've watched. I watched a lot of it over the weekend, and I was loving every second of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you were saying about the catch-22 before. I think with the combine these days, all the players who are like pretty cemented in the first round most of the time. I mean, there's definitely exceptions like a Sonny Styles or an Arvell Reese this year, but a lot of those top names just don't work out at the combine. Like they either save it for the pro day or they don't do anything and they just let the tape speak for itself. They'll show up for the interviews and stuff with the teams because that's still important, but a lot of those top names don't even test. So like Fernando Mendoza didn't test. I don't think Caleb Downs tested either. So
No,
a lot
he
of
did
those
not.
names, even I feel like guys who are like mid-round first round picks, like they're just like I don't need to test.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
crazy.
want to. So it's like it's kind of disappointing because you don't get to see those guys you're the most excited about, but at the same time, it does open the door for you to learn a bit more about some of those lesser known guys who might be first, second, third round picks or
Hmm.
even later. So it's definitely it has it's a bless or not a blessing curse. It has its like pros and it has its cons for sure. But
Hmm.
we're gonna talk some winners and losers to start here, Joseph. Why don't you give me your first winner?
Yeah, my first winner is Arvell Reese, and I know he was gonna be like a top 5 pick before the combine started, but I just really thought that he really shined the brightest in my opinion. I thought David Bailey running the 4.5 flat was absolutely impressive in its own right, and you saw Arvell Reese really want to beat that time. He ran a 4.46, 4/100ths of a second is gonna make or break someone, but you just see that competitive edge, and he was getting really excited, and I absolutely love the fact that he worked out with the linebackers and not with the defensive ends. He just looked so smooth in the bag drills, and he has like 6 inches height differential between him and his like competition of from the linebacker spot. But he just looks so fluid. He looks so smooth. He looks so fast. He's probably gonna be an edge rusher in the NFL, but he just showed NFL scouts that he can play both, and he has like the athletic prowess to play inside linebacker, and he really showed that in the workouts. So I thought it was absolutely crazy what he was doing. He's a mammoth of a man, and he's got feet like a ballerina. So I loved watching him work in the bag drills and the route drills. They were making him catch footballs on fade routes, which was kind of weird, but still,
Mhm.
like Arvell Reese was so good, and I was really impressed with him. And I think to me, he cements himself ahead of David Bailey, and that's what I think he wanted to prove at the NFL Combine, and he did exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, just the numbers jump off the page, and I think that it's crazy, man. The guys at Ohio State, I forget what article it was. I was looking at some combine articles this morning, but they're talking about like how insane it is that Ohio State didn't win a national title considering the guys because like I mean, even his teammate on defense there, Sonny Styles, was insane at the combine this year too. And I think, and even like in my opinion, I like him more than Arvell Reese personally. But
Mm-hmm.
they're both that like they both kind of have that like Micah Parsons vibe, where like Micah Parsons played a ton of linebacker in college, and then the Cowboys switched him to end, and he was just insane off the edge. And I feel like both of those guys have that ability, in my opinion. And I mean, it's just those stats jump off the page for a guy like Arvell
Mm-hmm.
Reese. Very impressive. Also, David Bailey has the weirdest body, man. He's
Yes.
shaped like a cone. It's very strange. But I was watching some video about him and the other defensive lineman Romello Height from Texas Tech, and they just like he just has like he's huge though. He's a
Mm-hmm.
big guy. I was surprised he ran as fast as he did, but it's yeah, he just has like he has like a belly, but then his arms are like so skinny. It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, my top guy here is Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, he ran a 4.39 as a 240-pound tight
That's
end.
crazy.
Like huge vertical jump as well. I think you just see him in a draft where there's not really like a deep wide receiver pool, especially when you look at those guys that are probably going off the board in the first round. And even like a guy like Carnell Tate, I think, isn't a surefire prospect by any means. I think Kenyon Sadiq could jump up draft boards after this performance because, I mean, you look at guys in the last couple of years like a Brock Bowers who are super athletic from that slot position, from that inline position, and Kenyon Sadiq, I think, can 100% be that guy, and he's faster than some wide receivers with that 4.39. Like he's just going to be a guy where you get him in the hands of the right offensive coordinator or head coach, and they're going to be licking their chops, man. I think he's a guy who can be a game changer at the next level. 6'3", 240, and can run a 4.39 40. Like he's fast, and I think that that's something that teams are gonna want. Like, I feel like at this point, I could see him going as the number 2 like receiving guy off the board at this
Yeah,
point,
I wouldn't
honestly,
be
and
shocked.
like I top 15 pick potentially at this
Oh yeah,
point.
he went to me from like barely making the first round to a top 10 pick.
Yeah,
Like he's that good. He was crazy, and like tight end is such a versatile position now that you need a slot guy, and the tight end like a 6'4" guy who's running wide receiver speed is like
yeah,
you gotta draft that guy top 10. That's why Loveland and Tyler Warren were drafted as high as they were. Same with Bowers the year before, and Sadiq's gonna fall right behind that line.
exactly. And I guess there's obviously the part where he doesn't have maybe the like route running of a guy like Colson Loveland, and he's not as physical as a guy like Tyler Warren, but the speed and the athleticism makes up for that where he was already a borderline first round pick. Like that potential jumps him up the boards in my opinion. And I think that there's so many teams who could use a guy like that where someone will take him in the top 15 at least in my opinion. Who's your next guy here, Joseph?
My number 2 guy is Dylan Thiedemann. I want people to highlight his 40 time a little bit more just because Lorenzo Style took the cake with a 4.27 for the safeties, but Thiedemann ran a 4.35, which is absolutely absurd. And I just think that Thiedemann, there was a lot of question marks on who was the number 2 safety going into the combine, and I think Thiedemann really solidified that over Emmanuel McNeil Warren out of Toledo. I just thought he looked better in the bag drills, and if you look at the tape on this guy, he plays a lot more nickel and inside linebacker type of presence, which a lot of NFL teams are looking for, hence with the Kyle Hamiltons and the Derwin Jameses of the world. I think that's why Caleb Downs is ranked as high as he is, because he's so good at both. I think Thiedemann is a step below that, while McNeil Warren is just a safety ball hawk, and he doesn't really play in the box as much. So I thought Thiedemann really showed his linebacker prowess within the bag drills and that mock speed. He can keep up with running backs and shoot any gap, and he creates a lot of turnovers. So I thought Thiedemann, he had a crazy 40, but also on the bag drills, and as a ball hawk safety, he's just the whole package. And if it weren't for Caleb Downs, he'd be the best safety in this draft.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that. Another guy where he was kind of a no name going into this cycle, but I mean, especially in this draft, I think this is going to be a common theme for both of us here. But when the depth is so like small and just there's so much room for growth for these guys, and when you come out and put on a performance like that, it can really shoot you up this draft board, I think. And I mean, he showed what he can do, and that nickel position this year is going to be critical because I mean, there's just not a lot of corners who jump out of the page on you. So I think that those nickel guys, I mean, we've seen the importance of them in the Seattle defense, the Eagles last year as well with a guy like Cooper DeJean, how important that is to having this kind of new age defense and having a really good defense, being able to just really hang with these offenses when they're running out of this like 13 personnel. So I think a guy like that is going to be jumping up draft boards here, and he's definitely probably jumped into the back end of the first round here.
Mm-hmm.
My second guy here is Jacob Rodriguez, off ball linebacker. You know, they don't get all the flashiness in the world, but he had a really good combine. And I think that he's a guy, Texas Tech, who really needed to kind of just show that, like, it wasn't just a one season thing and kind of just back up his performance on the field because Texas Tech was a bit of a surprise this season in college, and he put on good film. They made the college football playoff, and then just backing it up with those numbers. 4.57 isn't like a crazy 40, but that's pretty solid for a linebacker. And just overall, he was just explosive. I think he looked pretty good in the bag drills from what the reports are saying. So I think just showing up and like really just backing up your performance on the field here for Jacob Rodriguez has cemented him, I think, in the top 2 rounds here.
Yeah, for sure. I love his mustache too.
Yeah.
It is a sick mustache.
Yeah, exactly. You know, off-ball linebackers will never go really high, I think.
No.
Like, he's not going to be necessarily a first-round pick, but I think that he's a guy who can make a difference, and I
For
think
sure.
that that's shown with his athleticism at the combine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my last guy is Ty Simpson. I'm sold, dude. I love this guy, and I know Evan isn't the hugest fan, but at the same time, like, he took his opportunity with Mendoza not throwing, which, I mean, he's going to be the first overall pick. Why would he? And he just took that opportunity. There's a lot of guys trying to make a name for themselves, like Nussmeier, Aller, Carson Beck, the list goes on. And Ty Simpson really stole the show in the throwing sessions, in my opinion, and he was the second best quarterback going into this draft before the combine. And now that it's over, I think he solidified himself as a first round pick. Now, whether he's worthy of that, that remains to be seen. I really like his footwork. I think he's really light on his feet, and his footwork in the pocket is really, really good, and he can make like the improbable play. He can throw on the run when he needs to. He's pretty accurate with the football for the most part. So I like Ty Simpson as a prospect. If he doesn't go 16 to the Jets, which I think he will, I think a lot of teams will trade up into the first round in order to get this guy. There's a lot of quarterback hungry teams and not a lot of quarterbacks to show for it in free agency or in this draft class. So I think Ty Simpson worked himself into a first round pick. He didn't make any mistakes at the throwing combine or the throwing drills, and I think that's what solidified him as a first round pick. So as much as people don't think he's a first round talent, I think just because of the circumstances, he will be drafted as a top 20 to a top 25 pick.
I'm just always skeptical, man. I want to. I'm gonna be basing my quarterback stuff very much off of like what you put on tape for the most part, and I think that it's just Ty Simpson. Like you've seen the inconsistency with Alabama, and that's what concerns me. But at the same time, a lot of teams will kind of have that view, right, where it's like, oh, he looked great throwing at the combine, and they'll take a chance on him at the end of the first round. And I mean, part of it is just the fact that like you need a quarterback. It's the most important position. You're going to have to take a flyer somewhere. So I think he's definitely a guy who jumped off the board. And I think, I will say, at least at the combine, you're throwing to mostly receivers that you've never played with before. So there's at least that element where it's like you don't have this chemistry from actually playing with these guys. So you do really have to put the throw on the money. It definitely holds more weight than like a pro day where it's like you're throwing to guys you've thrown to every single day in practice for like the last 3 years or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think he will be a guy who sneaks in the back end of the first round. He's someone who has a lot of those traits you want. He can move around in the pocket. He can make things happen with his legs. He has a pretty decent arm, but yeah, I don't know. It's just no one jumps off the page, man. I mean, even Mendoza in some ways, I think, doesn't necessarily jump off the page for me. Just not an exciting quarterback class, I think, is really my issue.
Yeah, that's fair. I love Mendoza. I think he's the real deal. But like, yeah, Ty Simpson is one of those guys, and like, I'd like my Steelers to draft him, but at the same time, like, is there much of a difference between him and Will Howard? Like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
So why would you do that? But I like Ty Simpson. I think he's pretty good. He gives me Brock Purdy flashes, and maybe that's why I like him.
Interesting. I mean, I like Mendoza too, just to go back to that. It's just like it's so confusing. He really does give me like Joe Burrow vibes, and I'm very intrigued to see. I don't know. I feel like ever since the national championship, I've just been seeing like Mendoza's not that good, and it's like I'm confused. I'm confused on what to think now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
But
don't know. Like, is there really like a 5-star recruit in Indiana? Like, there's not really that big time name.
they
that
got a lot of guys through the portal.
Yeah.
I think is a big thing. But at the same time, like I don't know. I'm really impressed with what Mendoza did. Regardless, like obviously Indiana was dominant and he wasn't asked to do a lot, but he was great and he always stepped up to the moment. He put his body on the line, and I feel like
Yeah.
that's why it reminds me of Joe Burrow. You know, it's like win the Heisman. He didn't put up the numbers that Joe Burrow did, but he also didn't have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a different comparison. But I just feel like that mentality and how this season went for Indiana just reminds me of that LSU year with Joe
Yeah,
Burrow.
me
So
too.
I have that vibe and I believe, but
Mhm.
at the same time, it's like I guess his personality just kind of lends to that too. He's not like a super like outgoing guy or outspoken guy.
Yeah.
So, he's kind of faded into the background a little bit, honestly. And everyone just saying he's going number 1, so there's no reason to
Exactly.
talk about him.
Exactly.
Anyways, my last guy, speaking of quarterbacks, is a quarterback, Taylon Green out of Arkansas. And with this being such a thin quarterback class, I mean, every position seems thin to me at this point. But I mean, why not take a flyer on this guy in like the 3rd or 4th round? I'm not saying he should be a first round pick based on this, and he definitely, from what I've seen, has some serious concerns as being a thrower of the football, but these athletic stats are insane. I mean, a 4.36 40-yard dash as a quarterback. He was great in the jumping drills as well. He looks to be super agile, a 9.99 relative athletic score. I get to bring out my my favorite combine stat again this year. So just really like pretty much perfect when it comes to the athleticism score. And there's definitely the question marks around the production, but at the same time, like with that amount of athleticism, just see what there is. It's like I think it's kind of what Seattle did with Jalen Milroe, where there was
I was
definitely
just
some
gonna say.
serious questions. But
Yeah.
you take him in the third round. It's a somewhat valuable pick, but it's obviously not your most valuable pick. So why not? Honestly, if you're a
Yeah.
team who's like, it's like the Rams. It's like they don't need to take a quarterback this year because Matthew Stafford's still going to be there. But in the third round, fourth round, why not? See what he has.
Yeah, honestly, he could be a day 3 pick. He could be your backup quarterback. You can convert him into draft capital, just like the New England Patriots did with Joe Milton. Like he got a lot of hype from the combine, and I think this kid is getting a lot of hype. So you can see what you do from there. You can, and if there's an injury and he has the opportunity, you have a freak athletic guy. So I'd like to see him play wide receiver, like a 43-inch vertical and like a 4.3 speed. Like, what are you
He's
doing
also
playing
like
quarterback?
6'4" or 6'3" or
Holy
something
crap.
too. Like he's a big dude. Yeah, the worst case, just make him be a like receiver.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, let's move on to our losers, Joseph. Who's your first loser?
I had a tough time picking losers.
I know it's harder to find losers. I think
Yeah.
the winners stand out so much, and then it's like
Yeah.
you have to dig a bit deeper.
Yeah, for me, I picked Ruben Bain just because he didn't work out, and I feel like Ruben Bain to me is my favorite defensive end in this draft, ahead of David Bailey and Arvell Reese. And I thought Ruben Bain had an opportunity to really show the rest of the world that he is the best defensive end in this draft, and he didn't seize the opportunity. And the measurements came in, and he's got 30-inch arms, which are short arms. And why am I making a big stink of this? Well, because last year we had the whole Will Campbell fiasco. Everyone said he had short arms. He still got drafted 4th overall, and he looked like an absolute dud of a first-round pick. So I think a lot of scouts are looking more into the measurements, the intangibles. Can you swat your offensive tackle's arms away fast enough? And I mean, you're going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Teams want to take every precaution seriously. And the fact that you didn't stand out in the combine when your competition in David Bailey and Arvell Reese had such incredible combines, it really hurts your draft stock. So I think not a lot of people are talking about Ruben Bain as much as they should be. He's one of my favorite players, and I think he's dominant. But at the same time, he didn't show the rest of the world just because the other two guys were taking the spotlight, and he's now in the background.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is him not working out means the only storyline coming out of the combine for him is the short arms. And that's just it's a bad look, and it's definitely, especially when you pair it with the fact that Arvell Reese and David Bailey were phenomenal at the combine. Even a guy like Sonny Styles, I think, as well, is in that group where you might have fallen out of the or to the 10th overall pick or something. So it's tough from that regard. I'm a little less concerned about the length of arms, to be honest. I think the Will Campbell thing, in my opinion, got overblown because he had a pretty tough knee injury at the end of the season. It's I don't think it was the fact that he had short arms that he was struggling. I'm sure he was working his way through an injury, playing a bit, not at 100%. So there's definitely other factors. And I mean, long arms definitely I think increase your floor, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Ruben Bain won't be a good NFL player. But when you pair it with the fact that those other two guys were great at the combine, it's not great when the only storyline coming out is the fact that you have short arms. My first guy here is Malachi Fields, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. He just ran an insanely slow 40-yard dash, man, a 4.61, 8.2 relative athletic score.
Holy.
Not good, especially in a class where I think behind Carnell Tate, there was definitely some room for players to jump up the draft board here.
Yeah.
I don't think a guy like Jordan Tyson or Makai Lemon really are cemented in their positions, in my opinion. And I think that teams love drafting receivers in the first round, man. You could have made some serious money, and I think you just came out and really put on a dud there. A 4.61, I mean, I don't know. It's faster than Jake Bobo, but I mean, that was a guy who was drafted in the 7th round. So not great. If any, he definitely fell down draft boards. I think it doesn't matter what you put on tape at that. I mean, it does matter what you put on tape, but I think teams are going to go with a guy that's an exceptionally slow 40.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's not good.
The fact that the defensive ends are faster than you is crazy.
Exactly. And even linebackers, man, you're slower than than linebackers. It's a bad look, I think.
Yeah,
Real bad.
very
look.
bad.
Even if you're going to be a contested catch guy, obviously there's still a chance that you can make the catch and get open through like footwork or whatever, but like at the same time, even if you beat a cornerback, if you run a 4.6 40, they're going to be able to catch up with you. So
Mhm.
it's not a good look.
Yeah. My number 2 guy is another wide receiver. It's Carnell Tate. He ran also a slow 40, 4.54, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and it's not like a terrible time, especially for his height. He's pretty tall wide receiver, but at the same time, a lot of these teams want to see their wide receivers 4.4 minimum. And when you hit that 4.5 range, like I think Tet McMillan did last year, like they start to really panic. And I think Makai Lemon is getting a lot of buzz. He's getting so many Amon-Ra St. Brown comparisons, and that gauntlet drill that he ran, he was right on that line, and he looks so smooth running, catching the football. So he's getting a lot of stock up, and Carnell Tate with this, with this time is getting a little bit of a stock down. So it helps that Jordan Tyson's stock is also not going up. It's kind of going down as well. But Carnell Tate, like, you thought this guy was going to be a top 5 pick before the combine. Now you're questioning if Lemon's going to get drafted ahead of him, if Sadiq's going to get it drafted ahead of him. Will he even be a top 15 pick? That remains to be seen now. So the fact that it shifted just from that one time and from other guys doing better than him, I think is a little cause for concern for him.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, Carnell Tate was being projected, I feel like, to go like to the Browns at like what, 3 or
6.
2? 6. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just I don't know.
Or
Those
the
40
Titans at
times are
4,
tough.
yeah.
Yeah, the Titans at 4 as well. It's tough. I mean, I think he's a guy who's produced on a really high stage and has kind of shown, but at the same time, it's the same thing as Malachi Fields, where it's just like those 40 times when you get above like a 4.5, and I think he was just above a 4.5, so you're in a bit of a different camp. But like 4.5, 4.6, it's getting to the point where it's like this could be concerning. And I mean, you do have guys like Drake London or whatever who weren't or who really didn't jump out of the page from an athleticism standpoint and are still really good receivers in the NFL, but it definitely raises some red flags and teams might prefer other guys over you when you do look a bit slower.
Yeah.
Carnell Tate, man, his body though, like his arms are so long.
Crazy.
It's like, I don't know, man. It's not as big of a concern for me.
Yeah, still trust OSU wide receivers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're usually not busts. I can't think of one who was drafted in the first round who's been a bust in the last little bit. So it's definitely that. For me, my second guy, Emmanuel McNeil Warren. Joseph, you talked about him a bit, and I think that he also ran a 4.52 40, so just slow. He wasn't like crazy unathletic at the combine, but at the same time, I think that you show that slowness, especially when you're projected to be more of a field safety deep down the field, trying to catch up with receivers running full speed. That's a bit of a concern. And then Dylan Theinman's performance as well, just it drops him down the board in my opinion. I think that he definitely falls to at least the third safety in that, like in those rankings there, because of what Theinman did on paper. And I mean, coming out of a smaller school like Toledo, I mean, we saw how Quinion Mitchell, I think, was a guy who he tested incredibly well and put a lot on film, but just because he went to Toledo, he like really fell down the board. I mean, he was drafted like 22nd overall.
that's
So
right.
I think that the lack of athleticism shown at the combine, mixed with the fact that he goes to Toledo, mixed with the fact that Dylan Theinman put on such a good performance, he definitely dropped a pretty decent amount down the draft board.
Yeah, he might not be a first round pick after this combine performance, and that's really sad just because like the high safety last line of defense is really dying in the NFL. You need to play more in the box, like I said earlier, and the fact that you're like you have to be the fastest guy on the football field if you're the last line of defense, and the fact that he ran a 4.5 when these wide receivers are running 4.2s and 4.3s, it's kind of concerning from that perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at a guy like Malachi Starks, so I think similar thing happened to him last year where he was a bit underwhelming at the combine and he fell to 32nd overall or whatever, or 28th overall. So I think the similar thing could happen with Emmanuel McNeil Warren here, where that free safety archetype is a little less valued at this point, and he was a little slower than maybe we expected. So he definitely might be falling towards the end, if not out of the first round.
Yeah.
But you also never know with this draft, man. I think this might be the craziest draft we've seen in a while.
Oh, I can't wait.
Your last loser here.
Yeah, I got Francis Mauga out of Miami, the offensive tackle, and just the fact that the combination of Marcus Freeling out of Georgia stealing the show yesterday at the combine and how good he was, and the combination of that and like the defensive players being so good, like Moaga was projected to be the 3rd overall pick pretty comfortably. Now he might not be a top 10 pick in my opinion. I don't think he did anything wrong at the combine, or like he played pretty good, but like at the same time, like there's such a heavy emphasis on defensive players, especially higher up in this draft. I don't know where Fuaga sits right now, so he was pretty comfortable being the 3rd overall pick in a lot of mock drafts. Now I'm not seeing him there post combine, and it's just like I don't know where to put him. I don't know if he's going to be the first offensive tackle off the board. I think he's the best, but between Spencer Fano and now Marcus Freeling out of Georgia, I don't know where Moaga's going to be, and if teams value him as high as they did, say, a week ago, which is absolutely crazy because he didn't do anything personally to impede his draft stock. It's just the way the combine crumbled.
Yeah, the one thing that saves him is teams' offensive tackle is always a position of need, but he definitely could have fallen behind a guy like Spencer Fano who kind of lucked out by not competing at the combine, and that's where the argument comes in is if you don't compete, it's harder for your draft stock to fall. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. He's definitely still in probably the top 3 tackles in the draft. He'll still be a first-round pick, but I think you're right. There's a chance teams now are like, oh, we'll take Fano over him, and he could fall a bit farther than maybe he was projected to before. My last guy here is Diego Pavia. He did not compete in any drills, but I mean, these interviews, man, are brutal in my opinion. And he also, I think, on Vanderbilt's website was measured in at 6 feet tall, and then at the combine he measures in at 5'10". So bad look there, 5'10", and dude, his quotes, I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but it's just like everything he says is stupid. He's like, I don't care what any team thinks about me, like whatever that thing at the club with the like fuck Indiana or whatever that sign said. I don't remember if that's what it said, or Mendoza, something about Mendoza because he won the Heisman and he was all pissed about that. Like he's just proving to be a knucklehead, and when you mix that with the fact that he's 5'10" and is nowhere near as athletic as a guy like Russell Wilson or a guy like Kyler Murray, like he genuinely might be a 7th-round pick at this point. Like
He might go undrafted.
yeah, like I don't know where you draft him at this point. Like he's interesting in the way that, like, I like his compete. He really fights hard. He's physical. He'll run through contact, but at the same time, and like he's stocky for 5 feet. It's not like he's 5'10". Like he's not like super lanky or anything, but it's just like I don't like nothing about him jumps off the page, and him being a knucklehead in these interviews just is not going to make teams want to draft him.
Hell no. When you say Johnny Manziel is your mentor, like that's
Concerning.
What are you
Incredibly
doing?
concerning.
What are you? Why would you admit that? I don't know. I never liked him in Vanderbilt, and like I didn't think he was gonna be eligible for the NFL draft this year. I thought he was gonna wait another year, but damn, bro, it's like this is a weak quarterback class, and you are just making it that much weaker, and it's crazy.
Yeah, he's gonna be. Yeah, he's not even in the top 5 quarterbacks at this point, and I don't think his draft stock was like that high after the season, even after being in Heisman contention. But if he had just shut up after being in like the top 3 for Heisman voting, I think he'd at least be regarded as maybe like a 3rd-round pick or a 4th-round pick. Like he's just tanked his stock.
Crazy.
Yeah, it really is, man. I just like anytime I see a quote from him, I'm like, holy, like what are you even talking about, man? Just like stay focused. All right, we have a few draft questions we're going to answer, just kind of relating to combine, post-combine, what we're kind of thinking. Then we'll give you our players who may define or swing how the draft goes here. So the first question, is this a draft class where the defensive linemen actually have true potential, or are teams just in desperation to pick them based off trends and advanced stats that highlight the importance of defensive linemen at the NFL level?
I don't think this draft class is that good in terms of defensive ends. I think you always have like the sought after draft classes like Miles Garrett or Chase Young at the time, Nick Bosa, Will Anderson, Aiden Hutchinson. They are surefire. Like, this is going to be your cornerstone defensive end for the next 10 years, and they're going to get double digit sacks on a daily basis. You really don't have that in this class. Like, I don't think David Bailey is that guy. I don't think Ruben Bain is really that guy, especially when he had Akeem Mesidor on the other side of him. You don't know how he's going to attract those double teams, what he's going to do with that. And then Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, you don't even know which position that they're going to play. Those four guys to me are first round picks. After that, like, you get into really, really muddy waters, like TJ Parker and Peter Woods out of Clemson. I don't know about them. Keldra Falk out of Auburn, like, they're projected to be top 15 picks, but you're just like, is this a guy that really wows me? I'm not 100% sold on them. So to me, like, I think just position of need is quarterback number one, which there are barely any in this draft outside of Mendoza. And number two is defensive end. And I don't think that there are a lot of talented guys at the front or the back end, especially. It's just they're getting their draft stock elevated just because of the position that they play. And teams are banking on a hope and a prayer that these guys reach their peak athleticism, they reach their potential, and then they can only rush 4 and drop back 7. That's what the game has turned into. It's turned into less blitzing and more relying on those defensive ends. It's just, I think a lot of these teams are going to ask too much of these guys being top 15 picks, and then I don't think that they're going to work out. So that's the trend I see with this draft, and I'm not sold on the back half after those first 4 guys that I mentioned.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think you don't have the high highs like you mentioned. Like, even I'm just thinking back to a draft last year, like last year's draft, where yes, you had Abdul Carter, but it was deep. Like, there was so many
Yes.
defensive ends drafted at like the end of the first round, start of the second, like James Pierce Jr., Donovan Ezuruaku, um, Mike, what is his name? Mike Brown or whatever.
Mike
Who went?
Green?
Mike Green. Yeah,
Yeah.
like there was a bunch of those guys who were like they weren't those high end prospects necessarily, like a blue chip like an Abdul Carter, but there was so much depth and there was so many options at the end of the first round, start of the second round. Versus this year, it's like you have those guys like they're interesting. You know what I mean? Like Ruben Bain, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, but then there's not the depth to back that up. Like you
Yeah.
have those like borderline top 5 guys, borderline like they're definitely first round picks, but they're not like surefire. Like I would draft them at first overall kind of
Yes.
guys. So I just yeah, it's not it's not intriguing me, and I think there's a lot of guys who maybe could be role players in the NFL draft, like a guy like Romello Height, where he's super fast and can be that like pass rushing specialist, but he's not going to be an every down player. So it is really tough to see. There's not a lot of guys who I'm super intrigued in, especially when you start going down the list a little bit farther. So, I mean, they'll definitely take guys. I mean, it's just the way it is, and none of the other positions really jump off the board. So it's like defensive ends are super like high value positions, and we saw that. But we've also seen, I mean, for years we've seen this where you don't need necessarily a superstar defensive end to have a great defense. You just need depth. So I think
Mhm.
if you start drafting for depth and you think of it
Yes.
more in that perspective as a team, there's definitely guys that are going to fit that. And maybe we see some guys who maybe weren't expecting to go a bit higher just because they fit what that team needs a bit better as a rotational guy. So I could see that potentially, but yeah, as like surefire things like top tier edge rushers, there's definitely not that like availability in this draft class. And I think NFL teams probably will overdraft some of these guys, but that's just the nature of the draft, I think.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, next question here. Who besides Mendoza is going to contribute to this QB class? Are any of these guys? I mean, there's a lot of guys we were hyped about
Yeah.
before this season. The college football season really tanked a lot of these
Mhm.
guys' stocks, but a Garrett Nussmeyer, Carson Beck, Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, can they live up to the hype?
I don't know, man. There's so many unknowns. Like, you went in and they had great years the year before, and then this class. I mean, Carson Beck wasn't really sought after coming out of Miami, and
No,
he
there's
went,
a reason he went
Yeah.
back to school.
yeah, that was. But like the Nussmeyers and the Allers and the Klubniks of the world, like I really didn't expect this from them, and you see the raw potential, but I just don't think that teams are really gonna take a flyer on these guys, especially the fact when they want results right away. And I think that they're just going to be into backup roles, and they're going to be in backup roles for a very, very long time just because they don't want the NFL teams have such a short leash on NFL quarterbacks. There is so much pressure. So even if these guys play 2 games and they're mediocre performances, they're never going to have the opportunity to be a starting NFL quarterback in the league again. So I just really think they shot themselves in the foot. They had an opportunity to make this draft class a really deep draft class. And now there's probably only going to be one, maybe 2 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. And it's kind of sad, but at the same time, like, that's how the NFL works. Like, they're not going to take a flyer on. I mean, the only time I've seen it is Bo Nix, and no one expected him to go 12, but that's because Sean Payton's from the old school mentality of developing quarterbacks, molding them into what you need for your offense. Now these NFL teams, they just want to rely on your athleticism, rely on your arm strength, and a lot of these guys just don't have those intangibles along with the IQ. It's just mediocre performances, and that's just going to grab a lot of bench, and these guys are going to be backups for a very long time.
The other thing with Bo Nix is he was actually good in his last college
100%.
season versus all of these guys except Carson Beck were not good at all in their last seasons. I mean, Drew Aller got his coach fired.
Yeah.
Clemson this year was really bad, and they historically have been one of the best teams in their conference. And then Nussmeier as well, LSU, he also got his coach fired. So there's just not a lot of like intrigue, in my opinion, in that position. The only guy out of those that we named, I mean, Ty Simpson, I think, is clearly the number 2 guy, but Carson Beck interests me. I think he's a guy who reminds me of Quinn Ewers a little bit, where really like highly, like lots of hype around him in college, kind of disappointed towards the end of his college career. And I think he will be a later pick. Like, I don't think he's going to be a second-round pick or anything, but that 3rd, 4th, 5th round, that kind of area, a Carson Beck could end up starting and maybe impressing some people in camp the way that kind of Quinn Ewers did in Miami. If he goes to the right situation, obviously. Like, he's never going to be starting over someone like a Bryce Young or whatever in Carolina, but if he goes to the right situation and there's just an absolute dumpster fire situation at quarterback, I could see Beck being a guy who can come in and do okay at the NFL level. But outside of that, I really don't have any interest in any of these guys.
Yeah, no. Beck could be a great system quarterback. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Put him with the right offensive mind, maybe a little bit of talent around him, he could be serviceable, but he doesn't have that like next level talent. And the last question here, what position group are you most excited for in this draft class and why?
I love the secondary draft class. I love the secondary in this draft class. I think that's my favorite. I love Caleb Downs. I think he heads this group. He's an absolute phenom at the safety position. I think the fact that you have 3 safeties projected to go in the first round is actually so cool, and that the safety position is getting more recognition. I love the corners in this draft. I think Mansour Delane is an absolute freak of a man at corner, and his man-to-man coverage skills are second to none, and that's what every team is looking for. He could put any wide receiver 1 on an island, and I think he has really good potential. Jermon McCoy is a very interesting story. How does he bounce back from that ACL injury? Will he go as high as projected based off of that injury? We saw with Will Johnson last year, those injuries can make you slide your draft stock. I love Hood out of Tennessee. I love Avion Terrell. I love a lot of these guys, so I think it's a very deep class, and I just can't wait for this class. I think secondary gets looked over a lot of the times, but you have slot guys, you have island corners in this draft class, you have the full potential, and I think a lot of teams are putting more emphasis into the secondary, hence why there's so many names in this class.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued about the running back position. Jeremiah Love is really the peak of that, and I think that the lack of depth behind him is also very intriguing. Like, there's not really anyone else who you'd even consider a first-round pick here, which isn't abnormal, but, like, the names, there's just no hype around the running backs, and that's what intrigues me, because I think that teams, the what I've seen a lot this offseason is teams moving towards that two-headed backfield kind of style, and I think that teams are going to want to draft running backs in those 2nd and 3rd rounds here, and it just doesn't feel like there's the names to back that up for the most part. So I'm going to be interested there. I really like Jeremiah Love as well. He's just got that. He's a bigger bodied running back, but he's so athletic. He was really good at the combine as well. He put some really good stuff on tape there. So I think that Jeremiah Love could go super high in this draft, but then like there genuinely could be like 40 or 50 picks before the next running back's taken. Like there's not really anyone. There's the guy out of Arkansas, I think, that's
around the 4-3-3.
Washington.
Yeah, Malik Washington.
Yeah. But like I don't know, man. Like there's not really anyone else who I'm like it's that interesting at the running back position, but I think teams are gonna want to find that like secondary running back that can kind of like be someone who gets positive yards when you take your starter out of the game and gets a pretty decent amount of touches because like I mean you saw with Seattle, right? Like Kenneth Walker is the number one, but Charbonnet was still a huge part of that offense, and I think teams want to move to that just because it keeps those stars healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And like you saw from last year, like the running back class was absolutely crazy. It was so deep. You go into this year and there's only one. I think Jadadeon Price out of Notre Dame can sneak himself into the first round a little bit for teams that are very hungry for a running back.
Two
Like
Notre Dame running backs in the first round.
that would be
crazy.
absolutely crazy. But like there's really no one. Jam Miller out of Alabama is a guy who also really intrigues me. He's a bowling ball. So there's a couple guys, but like there's no hype around them just because I think Jeremiah Love is just that guy, and B, like you came from last year where there was so much hype, and it's like, okay, there's no one left to draft this year. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Exactly. 2027, man, that's going to be the year of. It's going to be a crazy draft next year, full of talent. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it'll be interesting to see what teams do. Not that they like drafting running backs in the first round, anyways, but there's no one. It just doesn't feel like there's anyone who really jumps off the page. All right, Joseph, our last segment here. Players that will define and swing the outcome of the 2026 draft. Who have you got?
Okay, my number one player is Jeremiah Love, and obviously, I think he's one of the best players in this draft. He's the second best player in this draft behind Mendoza to me, and he's just so elusive. Like when he jukes, he does not break his stride, and that is so tough to do at the running back position. He can hit the D gap at an explosive rate. He can find holes that aren't even there. Like he's the full package at running back. He's a receiving back as well. I think the reason why he's going to define this draft is because 7, 8, and 9 between the Commanders, the Saints, and the Chiefs are going to want to trade up into the top 5. And so this is a draft where you are not trading up. You want to trade down, but there are literally no suitors just because the talent is not there. Jeremiah Love, to me, is the only guy, even though he plays the running back position, where teams are intrigued at trading up, specifically with those 3 teams that I mentioned. So I think he will be a top 5 pick, and I think you'll see a crazy trade, and then the rest of the teams won't know what to do. So let's say the Saints trade with, like, I don't know, the Giants at 5. What are the Commanders going to do after that? What are the Chiefs going to do after that, who he's projected to go heavily there? So I think he defines a lot of what's going to happen in the top 10, and a lot of these teams are going to pivot after they draft him because he's their number one on most of these teams' boards.
Yeah, I mean, that's mix of size and athleticism, like I said, is super intriguing. And yeah, once you hit that like eighth pick range, he's going to be the best player on the board probably. So it's going to be hard to pass up. But yeah, some of those teams in those mid rounds who really need a running back could be licking their chops here to try to jump up the draft board. For me, my is kind of Carnell Tate / Makai Lemon. I don't really know which of these guys is going to go first, but I could see receivers going a lot later and kind of the first receiver off the board going a lot later than maybe we expect. I mean, like we said, Carnell Tate was going like 4th, 6th off the board in these mock drafts before the combine, but like none of these receivers really like shot into a like position of like, oh, we need to take this guy in the top 10. Like no one really stood out at the combine, and I think that could lead to teams kind of holding off on some of these receivers. And I think that like these guys going off the board is going to kind of start a cascade, right? Because you're going to see whenever that first guy's drafted, teams are going to be like, oh shit, we need to start taking receivers. So I think that if like there's a chance that these guys fall and you don't see a receiver taken until kind of the middle, like after the 10th overall pick here. And I think that that's really going to change the order of the draft quite a bit and change how teams like team strategies here. So, but there's also a chance that like Carnell Tate gets drafted fourth or sixth overall, and then like those guys get pushed up the board. So I could see, depending on where the Carnell Tate, whatever, or Makai Lemon, whichever one is the first receiver off the board, I could see that really just changing, like just based on where they're drafted. That's going to change how other teams like decide their strategy.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Who's your other one here?
Mine's Caleb Downs, and the fact to me he's the best defender in this class, and
Possibly the second best player in the class.
yeah, exactly. And like he's such a phenom at the safety position. He could be a linebacker. He's such a great tackler. But it's just like the safeties don't get enough love, and these defensive ends, who I think Downs pound for pound is better than, like to me he should be second overall to the New York Jets. But he's not going to be, and I think one of these teams is really gonna luck out because like they're not gonna trade up for a safety. That would be absolutely crazy, especially where Downs wants to go, which is projected top 10. But like this reminds me of too much of Kyle Hamilton. Like Kyle Hamilton was supposed to be a top 5 pick. How does he fall 14 all the way to the Baltimore Ravens? And I just see that happening for Downs as well. And it's going to be, okay, do we take a defensive end just because of position, or do we take best player off the board? And it's going to be like that battle, and fans are going to be frustrated for like 10 picks. It's like, how has this guy not been taken? Please, someone take this guy. I think that's what's going to happen with Caleb Downs. And it's really, really sad because he by far is the best defender in this class. And the fact that he's going to be like, to me, like a top 15 pick is just so wrong on so many levels, especially when, like we said, this is a weaker defensive end class. It's just the value of the position to me has taken over best available player. And sometimes that does work out. But other times, like for these bottom feeder teams who have top 10 picks, why do you not take the best player available? And I think a lot of teams are going to regret not drafting Caleb Downs.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is literally Kyle Hamilton 2.0. Like, clearly he is a great safety, but teams just don't care. And I mean, I don't know though. Going into like the back, like those teams like New Orleans, I think could definitely take a flyer on a guy like that. Cincinnati, maybe Miami, but yeah, it's like he probably should be going in the top 3, top 5 max,
Yes.
and he might fall out of the top 10 here. But at that point, you never know. Some team might trade up for him too. I could see that as well. Like one of those, I don't know, you look at a team like a Tampa at 15, they might trade up a little bit for a guy like that, or even lower on the board. I mean, the Rams, something like
Yeah,
that,
that'd be
you could
great.
trade up. So it'll be interesting. I think that'll definitely be one of those ones where it's just like painful. You're just watching him slide. You're like, this dude is so good.
Yeah.
For me, my number 2 is Sonny Styles, man. I am so in on this guy. I think he might be my favorite player in the
Nice,
draft. I
dude.
mean, he just the freak athlete. He put it on tape at the combine. Super fast and super versatile. I mean, he's maybe an inside linebacker, maybe he's an outside linebacker, maybe he's an edge rusher. I just love that versatility. I mean, it gives me Micah Parsons kind of vibes, and I think that obviously Arvell Reese is cut from that same cloth, but I don't know. Sonny Styles just does it more for me. I'm very excited about him. I think that he is someone who could be picked in the top 5, in my opinion. I think he could be picked that high, but at the same time, he's a guy again who could slide. I mean, there's a lot of guys where that like question about his like actual position could be a like a negative for some of these teams looking at players where you have to figure out where he's going to play. But if the right team has the right plan for him, I mean, this guy could be a superstar. And I just really love what I've seen from him so far. But like, I could see a team getting aggressive if he falls outside of the top 10 and trading up for him. And I think that could really shake up the draft order.
Yeah, I think just because of his size, everyone is like so hell bent on Alvaro Reese because of he's taller, being a defensive end, and they just already put Sonny Styles into that inside linebacker mold, and
Yeah.
like they think he's gonna be an inside linebacker, and that's why he's falling. And like I think he should be defensive end as well. He'd have a better impact, and he's so fast, he's so quick. It's just that size is a little bit tough. But even if he is an inside linebacker, like he should still be a top 5 pick. Like Devin White was a top 5 pick in 2019. We need to get back to that trend of like the middle linebacker being the heart and soul of the defense. We don't see it anymore in the NFL. Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner were that for years, and then ever since, like it's died down significantly. We still have Fred Warners and Roquan Smiths, but Sonny Styles has the potential to do that, and if you have a guy like that on your team being the quarterback of your defense, you automatically have an elite defense. So teams should trade up for him. I don't care if you think he's an edge. I think you should play him at inside linebacker and you'd still get that same value.
Funny thing is, he's still like 6'5", 245.
I
Like
know.
he's still massive.
Yeah.
So just like how can you pass up on that man? Oh, I like him a lot. I think
Mhm.
I agree. I think he'll end up being an edge rusher or an outside linebacker at the next level. But like, dude, I don't know, man. I hope he falls. I just want Seattle to take him because he just fits that scheme perfectly. I mean, they have those defensive ends drop into coverage all the time. Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine having Sonny Styles do that? It will never happen. It's not going to happen. But I don't know. If you have one of those defensive schemes, I think it's a perfect fit. Like, there's those Mike McDonald kind of schemes are spreading, and I mean,
Yeah.
if you can have a guy who has an ability to be a huge impact, make a huge impact as a pass rusher, but then also you can trust completely in coverage, like it's just a mess for the quarterback.
Yeah, he's fun.
I like him. All right, that does it for this episode. The NFL Combine has been recapped. I think next week we'll be diving into free agency. I think we'll be
Yeah.
almost there. But until then, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Ball Watchers Pod, on TikTok at Ball Watchers Pod, and also subscribe to our YouTube. We stream every episode over there at Ball Watchers. So make sure you check all those out. Subscribe to the podcast as well, and we will talk to you next week. Stay up, Ball Watchers.